Um, I'm with the REC program, which was started back in 1992, and I'm part of the REC team that works out of the Lino Lakes facility. REC, again, as Pastor Paul had mentioned, stands for Residents Encounter Christ, and we do refer to them as the residents instead of inmates. The REC team consists of people that have gone through a tech program or a koinonia or cursillo, and those programs are 3-day events on the outside at the Lino Lakes facility, and the prisons are usually only a 2-day affair, at least at the prisons are. The retreats are Catholic-based. However, not all of our team members are of the Catholic faith, but they are good Christian, have good Christian backgrounds. And we all do believe in the same God and the same Jesus. So the theme is the Paschal Mystery, the death and resurrection of Jesus. And on the outside, the third day is what they call Go Forth Day, meaning that Jesus is now with us in our hearts. We've learned more about him and ourselves, and it's time for us to go and spread that word to those on the outside and to bring others to Christ. The weekend consists of, we have praise and worship time, music. There are some teachings, several talks on the weekend, and again, it's all based on being able to encounter Jesus. So those talks all are about how we can further bring Jesus into our own lives. We also have reconciliation time on the weekends, and we end our weekends with the liturgy of the Eucharist and the Word. Most of the facilities, there are somewhere between 25 and 30 individuals that make a weekend or one of the retreat weekends. At Lino Lakes, we're pretty blessed over there. We have, there's another program over there. I should back it up here. We used to have about 25 or 30, 25 to 30 residents come on our weekends also. And we started at Lino Lakes back in 1995. They now have another program over there. It's called IFI. And since that has started, it's a Christian-based program. It's part of the fellowship team, prison fellowship team, I'm sorry. Anyhow, since that has started over there about the past 10 to 15 years, something like that, our numbers in our own REC retreat weekends that we have are anywhere from 65 to 75 individuals on a weekend. So we have lots of individuals that come and join us. It's a very powerful time. We have these retreat weekends 2 times a year. Some of the facilities are only 1 at this time here, but we're still working to get that increased. We've recently incorporated, just back in December, so REC, we were part of the Central Minnesota, the St. Cloud Diocese, but we've incorporated ourselves here now. We're part of the St. Paul Minneapolis Diocese, and we're called the GTC, Greater Twin Cities REC program. We're in about somewhere between 8 and 10 facilities around the state of Minnesota, I think. But we mainly work here, our team, I should say. Most of us are here at Lino Lakes. There are a few people that are on our team time and time again. They come and join us from all over the state of Minnesota. And they work in other facilities besides Lino Lakes, so they're quite busy with that. So I'm going to turn it over to Al at this time here, or Barb. So she's got her own mic, so if she starts walking around, you're in for some long message here, so you might want to
Is this on?
give her the sign. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I'm kind of ADHD, and I can't stand still when I talk. So, and plus I like to be up and close. I can't be far away. So, just so that you know where rec came from or how it started in Minnesota, there was a couple who went on a business trip, and they made it a vacation. So they took their 2 younger daughters with them. And so they did the business part, and they're in a different state. They come from Alexandria, Minnesota. So they're in a different state, having a little bit of a vacation plus work. And they were unloading their car. It was kind of in a darker place. You know, it was Jim and Pat Stroot. And Jim was kind of uncomfortable where they were because it was in an industrial and it was kind of dark, but they had no choice. They'd already made reservations. So they're unpacking their car. Dad's in the hotel room, kind of rearranging. Mom's out sending kids back and forth, the 2 girls back and forth with stuff. And then the mom asked for some paper towels. And so she went in, Greta, she was 8. Her older sister was 10. But Greta went in to go get the paper towels, to bring it back out to the car to clean up some mess. You know how it is when you travel with little kids? So there was chocolate on the seat. And so the older sister went back to Dad and said, "Why didn't you send Greta with the paper towels?" And he goes, "I did." Went back to the car. There's no Greta. They're frantic. And I'm just going to make this as short to shorten it up, but can you imagine the panic? They yelled for her and called her name and asked for help at the hotel, and the hotel only had 1 person working, and she wasn't much help. She didn't see much concern. And anyway, finally they cried enough and yelled enough that the police were called. And this went on for quite a few hours. There was no Greta. The mom, screaming, crying in a corner, kind of curled up in a fetal position. You can imagine the feeling, of not knowing where your daughter is. Dad, Jim, is beside himself, unsure, where is God? But he prayed a prayer. He went back into the hotel room. The priest and the mom were just finishing up with the rosary. Of course, there had been time in between this. And when they finished and said amen to the prayer, there was a knock on the door, and there was an officer with their daughter. Can imagine that feeling. She had been hurt, she had been molested and raped. But do you know, they pretty much are sure that when Dad, Jim, had prayed that prayer of unsureness, because he was questioning, that when he finished that prayer, the guy stopped molesting her and brought her back to an alley not far from the hotel. So you can imagine the turmoil of this family and what they felt and what the daughter felt and what the older sister, who was only 10, felt too, kind of feeling responsible, and what that felt like. And the anger that they felt. Unbelievable. And the dad says to this day, he said, he was out searching for this man for several months, and he said it's a good thing the authorities found him, because he would have killed him. It would have been bad for him, for the person who did this, and it would have been bad for Jim, because he would have ended up incarcerated. The authorities found him. Well, anyway, this family tries to get their life back together, and you can imagine how hard that is, especially with that anger. So trying to put it back together. So in this time, some people from South Dakota, who have been doing recs there for a long time in the prison, called them and said, "Come and do a retreat, this rec." And they're like, "Are you kidding me? They deserve nothing." But for whatever reason, they kept calling them. Finally, they just kind of gave in and said, "Okay, we're going to do this, and we'll show you they deserve nothing." So they went on this rec retreat. There in Sioux Falls, it's 3 days. They were changed. They were touched. They changed. They saw inmates, residents change. They saw hearts turn, because they're in Sioux Falls. It's pretty much like an old-time prison that you see in the movies. It's pretty scary. But they changed. They started to heal. The forgiveness started. And so what happened is that, there's some other process that Jim, the dad, went through. I think he went to a Promise Keepers event here in Minneapolis, and he was changed even further to even really forgive this man. And he even tried to go back to the prison to actually speak with him and meet with him, but the prison said no. They just would not allow that. So anyway, Jim and Pat Strout started inviting other people. So Tim and I went on this retreat, and PJ Connors, and so he's part of the Central Minnesota rec, so you might want to talk to him. He's in the central part of the state. Anyway, so we went. And so I have this thing where I just say yes, and I never really think about too much of the whole thing, And so we're driving 5 hours, to Sioux Falls, and I'm like, all of a sudden you're getting closer, and I'm like, what in the world did I say yes to, My heart's kind of beating because I've never been in a prison. So it's kind of like, duh. And so we get there, and we have to stand in line to get processed in. That takes a while, and I'm watching moms, girlfriends, whatever, them bringing kids to visit the residents, their loved ones. I'm like, I love my husband, but I didn't think I could go visit him if he was in prison. I really felt like it would be degrading, humiliating. I really didn't know if I could even do that. It's kind of about the look, how your life looks, and, you're put together, and so it's kind of about that look, and it's like, I don't think I could do that. And so anyway, we're processed in. We get to meet guys who have already made a rec weekend on the inside. And so I'm sitting down, and one comes and sits by me and says, how do you like sitting next to a murderer? And I'm like, inside, and my heart's just beating so fast. But evidently, I didn't look too shaken up, and it was fine. And on this retreat, women are on the outside most of the time, but we just come in for the retreat for significant parts of the retreat, if that makes sense. So we'd, come, and then we'd go, and we'd come. I noticed every time that I would come back that I changed. That I changed. That my heart was open. I would see these men. They're no different than you and I. They're messed up. They've done some bad things, really bad things. But there is no difference. And I just changed. My heart changed as I watched them change. One man said he hadn't been to confession for like 35 years. And he got to do that. And so that's how all of a sudden people had gone to these recs, and we were like, Jim Strout and Pat Strout, who went through this tragic thing with their daughter. Through tragedy comes goodness, and rec started in Minnesota because of them, and a few of us who started with them. And so that's how rec started, through tragedy. And how when God changes our heart through that tragedy, how goodness can come. And so that's really how rec came about. And so for the last 24 years, 25 years that we've been, when this started, and it just keeps continuing and slowly growing as God keeps opening doors. Al, you want it?
I'm Al Karen, and like John, I came from a fertile Catholic family of 13, and I would have never expected myself to be in prison ministry back in those days, growing up on a farm. But through Tim and Barb, I got introduced to, after I had made my tech, introduced to Lino Lakes when my wife and my daughter and my son would go in on Christmas Eve and do a Christmas program and see the response of these residents, missing their families, but yet we were their family coming to share the joy of Christmas and to hear these men's voices singing these Christmas carols that, they loved and they missed, and we were able to bring that into them. And that was probably 20 years ago when that started. And eventually then I did my first rec on number 13 in Lino Lakes, and then started again in Lino Lakes 31, and I've done them for the last 8 years. And now we have done a rec in Stillwater last December, our first one. We had 25 residents make that weekend. It's smaller facilities, so we have to have a smaller team and area to work in. But it was an amazing experience. The depth of their sharing on that weekend, these guys were praying for rec to come in. Some of them had made recs at other facilities. And we had 11 residents that were part of our inside team. So we had 36 residents at Stillwater. And the amount of sharing that they did just stunned us as outsiders coming in. So we have a real good foundation. And we found out what the reason was. We had a Cursillo group in Stillwater praying for rec to come in. We had a rosary group that was going in, praying the rosaries with the number of the residents. So the prayer base that was there was amazing, and we just had a spectacular weekend there. And I encouraged I see in one of the groups here were the prayer warriors, and on the back there were some 140 parishes throughout the Archdiocese that were praying for these retreats. And that's really what makes this work. It's not us. We're just vessels that go in and minister to the residents, just to be present to them. And like Paul says, not to fix them, just to be there and watch how God's going to move in their lives. And that's the amazing experience we get every time we go in on these retreats, is we see these miracles happen. We see these guys transformed, changed, and just the appreciation they show at the end of the weekend. And then we go in and we do a monthly meeting called Beyond Rec, where we prepare for the next retreat. And these guys that come to the Beyond Recs can then be part of our team for the next rec. And they get a different experience. They get to pray for their own cellmates or anyone they want to bring into the next rec retreat. So they get to serve as Christ served us. So they get to encounter Christ in a totally different way to these other residents that they're incarcerated with. So to me, that's the blessing of the rec ministry, is just being part of that. The amazing team that Barb and Tim have put together over these 20 years. And we continue to get more people coming in that experience the same thing. So we encourage you to really prayerfully consider that. One of the things that happens on the weekend is just the amount of prayer that we receive from our parishes. We have an adoration chapel that lifts us up in prayer as we go in. But it's something that really touches the residents on the weekend, is that somebody's been lifting them up in prayer personally inside the facility, and it just touches their heart. So I have a letter I want to read from one of the residents that has been out for about 2 years now, but he sent us a letter last Christmas, and his name was Ron Johnson, and this is what he wrote. I have wanted to write for some time now and think Christmas is the perfect time to thank people for their gifts. Thank you so much for your thoughtful and most supportive prayers. I know without question that the prayers of other people are what have seen me through the roughest waters of my life. What a comfort to know that when I was unable or unwilling to pray for myself, my prayer coverage didn't stop. Praying for someone when you don't really know them, but only that there is need, is something that has profoundly touched my heart. Thank you for your truly appreciated and wonderful gift of heartfelt prayers, and for giving me yet another perfect picture of God's truly amazing grace and incredible love. Sincerely and in Christ, Ron. So these are the kind of letters we get, the responses we get from the residents on how God's touched their lives. And because they've encountered Christ, they've experienced his unconditional love and his mercy and the forgiveness, things that we all need. And every time we go in, we get to encounter that again in ourselves. But yet we get to experience the miracles of amazing changes where these men don't know what God's love is. They don't know what normal family life is, as you've heard today in some cases. So they're sad stories, but yet they have hope now. And we get to see that on a monthly basis. And when they get out, we get these kind of responses on how grateful and thankful they are for this rec ministry. So I thank everybody who came today and prayerfully consider being part of any of these ministries. There's so much needed out there. So thank you.